I'm Dr. Fissler. I've emailed you, I'm sure 100 times, but not everyone knows me, so I'm just so happy that we're celebrating the end of our day with everyone here together. It's great to see your faces. And to welcome us and start, I'd love to welcome our Dean up to the podium. So Dean Sue Martinelli is the Dean of the College of Arts and Science, and I'm sure many of you know her as well, but welcome, Dean Sue.
This is always the joke. Hi there. Leanne, thank you. And I want to thank you all for being here today. I love being Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. When I look at all of you in the audience, whether you were our faculty, our staff, our students, you are what makes Western and the psychology department the best that it is, and I am exceedingly proud of the psychology department. So can we give a round of applause for all the members, current and past, of the Department of Psychology, whether you're in clinical, whether you were school psychology, experimental, I know the grad student, and anything else that I might have forgotten. If I'm asked why I'm so proud of clinical and school psychology, is because you are offering the quality education that our mental health providers absolutely need, especially in rural Illinois. I, again, cannot say enough about those programs, and I hope you know you will always have my office's support, whether it's for, and this is dangerous right now, but whether it's for hiring, whether it's for experiential learning, whether we're talking about undergraduate research, you all are amazing with the ILUA program, or whether you're talking about internships. You absolutely have the College of Arts and Sciences support. And again, I want to thank you, and I think you all are fabulous. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean Sue. And then next, I'd like to welcome our department chair, Dr. David Lane.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I really just want to bring you greetings on behalf of the entire psychology department. We're really pleased that you're here, that you've come back. I am not a member of the CCMH faculty. I am a social psychologist. But I've been here for 20 years and have been able to kind of see the clinical faculty and students from afar and have always been very, very impressed. In fact, I remember shortly after I got here, Eugene Mathis said to me, "You know, the clinical faculty work much harder than you and I do." And at first I was like, I don't know, but it's true, they do. And we notice it. People in the department do notice that, and we appreciate that work. More recently, I've had the privilege to teach a course that the CCMH students are required to take, and so I've been able to get to know at least some of the students more recently, and they are also very wonderful and hardworking. So again, we're very proud in the department of the clinical program and the psychology clinic. They do great work, and I, for one, am very pleased that they're here and hope they'll be here for another 50 years. So thank you, everybody. I know what we're really here is to hear from Tracy Knight, so I'll hand things over to him now. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, big lights. Well, I didn't know this until I had retired in 2018, excuse me, but I got a certificate in the mail that said I'm an emeritus professor. And I thought, I don't even know what that is. I looked it up, and emeritus means veteran soldier. Well, the better definition I saw was John Lithgow was playing a retired professor in a movie, and somebody said, "What does emeritus means?" And he said, "It means they recognize you're not dead, but they don't want you to come in anymore." So that I can live with. I'm privileged to speak here today because the program is one of the best I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them since graduating and even during my career. And it's nice to see so many people here because a lot of people wouldn't come back to their master's program anniversary, but the program engendered so many wonderful relationships among the people in it and between faculty and student that meant more to me than anything. And when I look out, I thought, these are some of my favorite people in the world are here today. So thank you for coming. When Dr. Cruz asked me to put a presentation together, we had a few slides that I think were used for the department's 50th, and it was a lot of statistics and so forth. And I thought, you know, I don't want to just be informational about it. I mean, I'm not going to go into comedy or anything. Well, I might. But I realize that the CCMH program is a living thing, and you can't just distill it into some numbers and stuff. And if I tried to do things only with facts, then it would be like, ladies and gentlemen, this is Wagner Hall. And that is not going to go very far. So it can't be through a series of facts that we get the real heart of the program. Why don't we go ahead to the next one? This is, you can ignore this if you wish. Originally, when I was picturing this at home in Peoria, I was saying, gosh, we could do things, and I can't give the same amount of information about everybody that's covered in this, so maybe people could come up and, you know, add things to it, and it could be kind of informal. Well, that's not going to work with TV and other things involved with this. So I do hope that you'll be swimming in a lake of remembrance today. And, you know, afterwards, nobody, I don't think, is going to kick us out very quickly. You know, maybe you can share some stories. Some people I have few stories about. Dr. Richard, I have a lot of stories about. And so it's going to be fun, and it's just an invitation to gather together what you can and maybe share it afterwards if you wish. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Wagner Hall. I was in the program from 76 to 78, and Wagner Hall was kind of sparkly in those days. It was in 68, I think, that it was built. Let me look, yes. And, you know, I think we learned to love it so much that I think at least one person here slept there sometimes, correct? Dan. And it was because of all the relationships in there, because when you think about it, other than those windows on the front, there weren't any windows in there. Wagner Hall, where sunlight goes to die, and weather is only a rumor. All right, enough of Wagner Hall. Interestingly enough, and I don't know if anybody recognizes this or ever thought about it, but our program was born as a result of the community mental health movement that began in the 60s with President Kennedy signing the Community Mental Health Act. It became, I mean, within years of that, including at Western, there were community mental health centers being developed all through the country. And since then, I mean, it's changed quite a bit. I once heard several people when I would go visit interns say, why do you still call it community mental health program? It's like that's passé or something, I don't know what. And I think I could answer that by saying it's because the philosophy behind that is one that we adhere to, that, you know, it's a community service that we have, and we coordinate with medical people and everybody we can to get assistance for people that need it. And like so many things in our country, at some point things get privatized and become businesses and so forth, and that's fine. But I was proud that we kept the name Community Mental Health, because that's the philosophy that guided us. Yes, we are psychic now. I don't even have to. It changed in the 70s because we were so busy. Others were there too, but I was in community mental health in the 70s, and we did everything. In Carthage, Illinois, town of 3,000, we had outpatient. We had sustaining care for people that had chronic mental illness. We had a work adjustment training program for people that might be employed someday. We had a sheltered workshop for people that were even closer. We had a work activity program for people that were not probably going to be employed but needed the relationships and the activities during the day. And it was really full. We had emergency, we had a 24-hour hotline. I missed some things about it. I mentioned this yesterday when meeting with the current students that I miss house calls. We used to do house calls, and you want to learn about somebody's life. You know, sit down with them on their couch and talk to them, and it was really something I missed when I wasn't able to do it anymore. I can change it to, yes, whoops, back one. Yeah. The clinic opened in 1968 before the 1972 birth of the CCMH program. We have had, at least during my experience there, a wide variety of clients. I think in the beginning of its existence, it was typically students mostly, and we tried to get more and more community people in there, and I don't know what the percentage was, but at the end we probably saw as many people from the surrounding communities. I remember I had a client that I worked with about 4 years that came from Iowa all the way over here because at some point the work we did here became a little known quietly. And I've always considered the program a kind of a quiet gem. We don't talk about it a lot or do anything, you know, particularly flashy about getting people to come, but people learned about it. And so we got referrals from physicians, hospitals, whomever. And it was really wonderful to see the variety of clients that we got to work with. All right, now I'm going to do this kind of strangely just because I don't want to go through everybody twice. So these are the clinic directors through the years. Besides the first director and the final director, the rest were also coordinators. So I'll just talk about Charles Potke and Tracy Cruz in this part. So Charlie Potke, and I can give some background on him. How many people here knew Charlie? Okay. He was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctorates at Loyola, and came here immediately after graduation. My memory of him is he taught in the graduate program personality assessment, and he loved it. He also was a practicing psychologist, and he would allow us to go with him to different activities. And I remember I went with him one evening to Beardstown, where he did some assessment. And just, you know, that was where you started to feel like I'm kind of part of this profession too, because I'm with this person. And he was wonderful. He was also, for those interested, the author of The Rorschach Clinician. And with Bem Allen, he was a co-author of Personality Theory, Research, and Application, and the Adjective Generation Technique, which I actually, in my doctorate program, wrote a paper about it because I knew the guys and I could get some information. And what it was a substitute for a checklist. You know, a lot of times psychologists would give people a checklist, check the words that best describe you. In this, you generate them yourself. What are 5 words that best describe you? And my memory is you could score them for favorability, and you could score them for anxiety. And I actually wrote a paper about how you could apply this to the analysis of fiction to watch the rising anxiety in fictional adjectives. I don't remember if it was right or not, but it was a good paper. And I don't remember, Eugene, do you remember when Charlie retired? I don't. Okay, I don't either, but he is retired. I'm sorry?
1998.
All right, thank you. I looked through Western's website, could find nothing about his retirement. And he now lives in Chicago with his wife in retirement. All right. Tracy Cruz came to WIU in 1998 when she was 14. And I've always admired her and you know, was in awe because she was assigned to both the clinical program and the school psychology program, and that's a lot to juggle. Bachelor's was at Southwest Missouri State. got her master's in clinical psych in 1993, and then her PhD in school psychology, 1998, both at ISU in Bloomington. She's licensed both as a clinician, clinical psychologist, and as a school psychologist. She has been wonderful to me throughout my time here. She's always supportive, very direct and steady, and the type of person you like to anchor yourself to when things are kind of up in the air. She's the co-author of Child Abuse and Neglect, the School's Response, a free copy that can be won in our little drawing after today's presentation. I hope today, too, you can learn some people or some things about this CCMH program that you've never heard before. And I learned some things, even though I was here early on. Okay. These are the program coordinators over time. How many people here know Peter Neidig? One. Okay. I met him once, but I don't think he was teaching any clinical courses at that time. But okay, let's go on to the next one. I found one photo of him, even though he became somewhat famous, and it was on Western's website, so I did find the picture there. He was a coordinator from 70 through 75, and Dr. Richard was his second in command at the time. Earned his PhD at the University of Tennessee, and when I looked him up, I found, you can point to the next one, New York Times actually had his obituary. He died at 53, and it said, that was the headline, a psychologist known for abuse therapy, and Western Illinois even made it into the obituary, although it was because they rejected it because of the climate. And he wrote a book called, let's see if I got the name, I don't have the name here, Spousal Abuse, Treatment Approach for Couples. And that was revolutionary at the time. The idea was that if there was abuse, you see people individually, which has some sense behind it. And he did a lot of research showing that you could productively meet with couples together and get someplace. So he was our first coordinator, and when he finished, Al took the role next. Now I'm trying to get through this relatively quickly, but I'll have to stop for some stories here. And that's partially because Al was here so long, 75 to 2007. He earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in clinical psych from the University of Chicago in 1972. And this name might not mean a lot, but it may to the students that had him. His primary faculty member at the University of Chicago was Eugene Genlin, who was the protege of Carl Rogers. And Eugene Genlin wrote a book called Focusing, about how to help people focus on feeling. And so Al would talk about Gene every so often, and he learned a lot from him. And I've often thought that even though Al never preached this in any way, the program really was shaped around a real humanistic approach, where the best things we do aren't technical, but very human. He wrote a book called Integrating Existential and Narrative Therapy. We often think about daring people to read it and explaining it to us. I had the privilege of reading it in manuscript form, and I can remember I would sit in a backyard table, drink in hand, and go through some pages of it, and I was amazed. I don't know that I told him to change very much about it at all, but it was just amazing that as soon as he retired, he began working on this. I feel like I decided to try to get some copies of his book to bring today to give away at the end. And it was so nice. The publisher shot me to a different site completely, and I didn't understand it, so I called the people, and then I explained, well, yeah, Al was a friend of mine, and we're gonna have this 50th anniversary and stuff. And so I bought one book, and they sent two. They liked my approach so well. And before that, I also had ordered a used book, which you can't really tell is used. So we actually have 3 copies of that, and we expect full reports on your analysis in the near future. My first exposure to Al, I got my undergraduate and graduate degrees, or master's degree here at Western. And when I got here, when I was in high school, there were no psych courses at all. And when I got to college, I was going to a community college. The first year I took psych, and I thought, this is it. You know, it was one of those, and I bet other people have had this experience where I learned things pretty easily and could retain them, and I thought, I think that's a sign. So when I got here, the only course open, and I was a sophomore, was Al's 424G course, Abnormal Psychology. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. And I got there, and it was full. My brother, who's 5 years older than me, had a couple friends that were also in the course, and they said, you don't want to take this. Haven't you heard about him? No. And I loved it. I was impressed with him immediately because of his vocabulary. He was a man that could use the word rubric regularly in just a normal conversation. It's a word I had never used in any context before. And he loved to lecture, you could tell. And so some of my brother's friends, and they were all like 4 or 5 years older than me, let him be frightened. I mean, I really liked it, and I ended up getting an A in the course, and I thought, there's sign number 2 that I'm in the right area. He was bathed in intellectual strength, and he was at the same time very serious and focused, so much so that he could be intimidating to students at times. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But he was also unflappable. And I have a story that illustrates this that some of you have heard before. I think it was a final exam in one of his courses. I don't know, it was a big exam. There were 5 of us who had survived the initial weeks of the CCMH program. And we just did this spontaneously. We were sitting in there, and all of a sudden, we had like 15 minutes, so we decided to do something. So we turned over all the tables. We got some army men from the play therapy room and put army men all over the floor. And the piece de resistance was we got the Bobo doll out of there. And I don't know if any of you remember it. I don't know if the Bobo doll still exists, but it was an inflatable doll that was a clown. Apparently some people needed experience in clown bashing. I don't know. And we took the Bobo doll, created a noose out of an extension cord, and hung him from the ceiling. So he's like, and then I don't remember if we were in chairs or on the floor, but everything else was on the floor. And then we just sat down and waited for him. And he came in, handed out the test, and sat down. And we felt like fools, and, you know, but we admired that too. It's like, how many people could have done that? And so as the test went on, the Bobo doll started leaking. So he was going like that. And I think he fell out of the noose at some point. Nobody reacted, so we stayed silent as well. And so I thought that is the definition of unflappable. You couldn't flap him on a bet. One of his sayings was, and he had a lot of sayings, and I wish I could remember more of them. One of them was, what have you people been reading? Marvel comics? This from a man who probably never read a Marvel comic in his life. But he also, as I said, could be kind of intimidating whether he meant to be or not, because he was very supportive, had a big heart, and so forth. Some of you over there will remember this. I took a sabbatical for 1 semester. And I continued, Al and I had lunch once a week, every Thursday, I think. And so we continued our lunch, and I would say, well, how are the students doing in practicum? He goes, oh, they're great group of students. I said, I knew it, it's wonderful. And probably, I don't know if it was halfway through the semester or what, I got a message, I don't remember if it was a phone call or an email, but it was, Dr. Knight, could you come in and talk to us? And it was like, he said, I don't want to say too much, but I'm starting to get hives. And and I mean, it worked out. I don't remember how, but I'm sure I went in, and I think Dr. Cruz at the time said, why did you have to come in? It's like, don't worry about it. And so we talked and made it through. But I couldn't believe the fact that he was just glowing and speaking of the students, and they were like, he's going to kill us anytime now. So I've never forgotten it. That was such a moment. But those are humorous stories, but at the bottom line was he was gifted, compassionate, a unique personality. he was somebody I became friends with, and yet we didn't really have a lot in common besides our professions, and that made it twice as much fun. And those of us who knew him know he made our lives better just by being around him. He's one of the handful of people I know his last words to me. And I'd gone to see him in the hospital, and he was drowsy, and I sat with him for a while, and suddenly he opened his eyes and he said, "I realize I've been very, very fortunate." I'm surprised he didn't say rubric in there someplace, but I thought, God, and then he went back to sleep. And I thought, how good is that? He woke up just to have gratitude. Like I said earlier, I think the program itself was person-centered, even though that wasn't beaten into anybody at all. That he had other things that we would touch, whether it be interpersonal therapy, cognitive therapy, etc. But we tended to recognize that the curative factor in therapy was the relationship and not some approach that we learned last week, even though those can be wonderful as well. And I think it's because of that that I used, in my last few years, a final exam in the summer would be one question: we love our clients, true or false, explain. And there was no right answer to that, because some people, when they hear that, think, it sounds a little creepy. But I think it was a type of love that you don't anticipate anything in return, except the privilege of sharing in somebody else's story, and maybe a fee as well. But that was really one of the things I took from the program. So I got my bachelor's degree in '76 and went into the CMH program. And I got out in '78, and I worked for not 10 years, over 5 and less than 10 years. And this sounds petty, but I went back to get my doctorate out of spite. Because when I got out of school, and I think Dennis Pope and Lynn Anderson could agree with this, you could be a psychologist with a master's. It's like, well, I always wanted to be a psychologist, got a role as a psychologist. All of a sudden, I think it was in the mid-'80s, they said, nah, not for long. And I thought, I'll show you. And I want to emphasize that at the time, I felt like I was doing fine, I was doing good work, I was enjoying it and so forth. So it wasn't that I had lacked something in my education besides a dissertation, and who needs that? And so I got it just because I wanted to be a psychologist. And I was lucky because, as it turned out, I was required to become a faculty member, so it turned out quite well. Now, I had to make the title for this, and I asked Dr. Cruz. She thought that was okay, because what had occurred to me. So we have Christy Keefe, 18 to 20, Tiffany Boehner, 21, 22, and Leanne Fizzler, who you met earlier. This was transitional for everybody. I mean, this was a period of time. Western, I don't know how many times this had happened, hadn't been getting our funding, things were getting squeezed, and then, let's add COVID to it and see what happens. And I think still there's a period of, okay, who belongs where and how can we get the job done as well as we can? And I had Christy and Tiffany both, Tiffany as a student as well, but I really treasured them as colleagues in the clinical program, and Leanne has impressed me a lot since I met her yesterday, but know a lot of good things about her. And so that was that. So, okay, contributing psych faculty members in the 20th century. Eugene Mathis, ladies and gentlemen. When I came here, yes. When I came here, I think it was maybe the second quarter, I was in quarters, folks, that I took his personality class. And it was in the basement in the big, you could fill lecture halls with personality at that point. And I got in there the first day and I thought, this is great, they have hippies teaching here. Which was a good thing. I mean, and Eugene has helped out in the clinic in the past. And he also wrote a book that I haven't found it yet after our move, but I have it at home someplace, called From Survival to the Universe. how humanistic do you want? And I didn't know this until then I looked up to make sure I remembered the title, but he has another book called, and this is on Amazon, Jealousy, correct? Yeah. So Eugene was part of it. Ken Fraunfelder I had classes from, and I had to ask today, but he helped in the clinic for a period as well. And I was embarrassed that the only thing I thought of, I liked Ken and enjoyed his classes, but he really told puns a lot. And I, for some reason, the one I remembered was he was in class lecturing on psychoanalytic theory, and then at the end said, well, that's food for thought, which my wife would call dad joke. But he was a great, I think he's retired in Florida, I believe, the last I knew. Val Smead taught crisis intervention and also helped for a period of time in the clinic. She has been a colleague as well. I didn't know her when I was a student. She wasn't here, but she was an assistant. So we had folks that when we needed help or people were on sabbatical or gone could step in and provide some really good therapy as well. All right. See, I told you she was 14. Jim Schmidt is now... Right? Very good. Well, and you all know Tracy Cruz, and Jim is now the Associate Dean and Professor of Psychology and College of Arts and Sciences, but they have been wonderful colleagues as well. And yesterday, I don't remember if it was Rhiannon or not, but somebody I was talking to said, we may have been scared of Dr. Richard, but I was even more scared of Shannon Lynch. And she was here a fairly brief time and really didn't like the area, I don't think. And Al and I used to conspire that we were going to get her in the car and take her up to the Maid-Rite for lunch because we knew she would hate it. But she didn't stay long. She's now a professor at Idaho State University. Melanie Hetzel-Riggin was here longer. Again, I don't have dates. But she's now the director of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences and a professor of psychology and at a branch of Penn State out east. Reg Adkisson, he was with us about the same amount. He left, I think, at the same time that Melanie did. But he's now a clinical psychologist at the Joint Base Lewis McChord military base in Pierce County, Washington, and loves it, the last I heard. And Amy Lauk, bless her heart, is still here, yes, and was, again, another graduate of the program. I mean, many people end up coming back here, maybe not even by design, but one of the reasons, I think, is because it's such a strong program. And she has been a licensed clinical and forensic psychologist in Florida, Georgia, and Illinois, not simultaneously, I don't think. Oh, yes, wow. I thought driving Peoria was long. Still works for the state as a forensic psychologist, besides her work in the CMH program. And let's see, next one. Additional faculty in the 21st century, Garrett Pollard. Let's see, he is now clinic director and professor at Stillwater, Oklahoma. Beth Reinhardt, another student and graduate of the program, is department chair and assistant professor of social and behavioral sciences at John Wood Community College in Quincy. And Brandon Cutmus, who you might see today, he's somebody that you could take a picture 20 years apart and you'd think it's the same guy. 2015 grad, and he has been assisting in the program as well. And he's the founder and CEO of Quad City Behavioral Health Associates. I wanted to add the next part very briefly, primarily for the students to see. I wanted to show how the program progressed curriculum-wise over the years. And again, I couldn't find all the information. I ended up having to order my own transcripts so I could see what I took and count the number of hours and so forth. So when I was there, 76 to 78, you had one on-campus year in quarters, mind you, which is 10 weeks rather than 15 or 17. And clinic involvement. We still had an active clinic then, even though it was a short period of time. And then a 6 to 9 month internship that you worked out before you went out. It was a total of 52 quarter hours, and I thought you'd be interested to know it's 34 semester hours if you do the transmission. Now let's check next. So in '98, there was this sudden recognition that if people tried all that stuff, they wouldn't be able to finish in the time that one would hope they could finish. So we became a 3-year program, continue with the hour-for-hour supervision, which I always found extremely valuable. And that's 66 semester hours, so it was almost twice as much as we did. We had to revise it to meet the LCPC licensing standards, again, because Illinois didn't recognize masters in psychology, and that was the next best choice. I don't know if the next slide may be helpful. Yes. More milestones we made. We ended up getting accredited by the Masters in Psychology accreditation. And that's so we have a lobbying organization for licensing and so forth, because the APA also tended to neglect us to a great extent. They've become a little softer, I think, but I quit the APA when I joined the Western faculty because they weren't supportive enough. 2014, the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation guaranteed that our graduates could sit for licensure because they were accepting like half of the people that applied and not accepting the others. One of the most deadly boring meetings I've ever been to is I had to drive to Springfield and meet with the licensing board. And I mean, what could I say? I said, I've already sent you a letter. What's the rule so our students can guarantee that they can apply? And they weren't very much help. And I don't remember who it was, but later we got word from the state directly that said all your students can sit from now on as long as they have the same curriculum. So it was interesting because when we looked at the curriculum, we far outweighed anything. We had stuff that counselors didn't take. I mean, it's because it's a different profession. So we were real puzzled by it, but I don't know, we got past it anyway. All right. Well, I just wanted to state this. I don't even know what the comprehensive exam was. When I was there, it was an objective test like you would take in an undergrad course, which is weird, and I think somebody other than Al made the test. And I had to retake it. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember I had to retake that part. But then you had an Al Richard essay question, which means 90 minutes of writing, and I passed that fine because I'd been around Al long enough. But then for a period of time, a greater part of it was an oral examination. And we changed that primarily because in some kind of Pavlovian quirk, students would walk in and begin weeping before they sat down over in front of Al. And we have empathy. And the other thing I remember about that is Al would ask the question and then be sitting across from the student for their response. And whatever the question was, I know the other faculty, we'd look at each other and go, we didn't know the answer either. So one of the things when I became the coordinator, I said, I just want to get through maybe a decade with no tears. And because I mean, I know they'd heard stories, it made sense, and it's like, oh God, I can't believe I'm going into the lion's den. At any rate, what is the comprehensive exam now?
They do extensive case workup, so they take
Oh yeah, okay, perfect.
and they do an ethics and research component.
Took us a while to get there, but that's a nice destination. Great. All right, internships. What I wanted to say mostly here, the area knows us, and in fact, we've got people in other states now doing internships. Primarily outpatient, but not all of them have been outpatient. And I can't tell you how many times I would go visit the interns and they would say, these folks are better prepared than anybody we've ever had as an intern. And part of it was, I didn't realize until I was on the faculty that a lot of people got masters in counseling and so forth and had never seen a client. And by that time, we had not only sat in usually with a faculty member as he or she saw a client, but we'd had clients of our own, even if Al came in and yelled at us afterward. And I think that's absolutely true today, and that's something we've been able to maintain. And that's why there's a lot of places, and Sinisippi came up yesterday, and that's one that will take our students as interns anytime. So that speaks a lot to it. We were initially going to make a list of all the different things people did, but it would be endless. But a lot of people have gone through and gotten another degree, whether it be a doctoral level, school psych. I know one gentleman that's went into nursing after this. Practice settings are all over the board: inpatient, outpatient, group practice, specialty practice, academia. And the best thing is lasting friendships. And in talking to Dennis and Lynn, the others from the 70s, one of the things I know we missed is connection. I mean, number one, we were only there a year, never saw anybody again, and we didn't know the people before us or after us unless we just happened to meet with them. And so one of the things that I've really valued in watching the students over the years is you have that really tight connection with one another, and that's something that does last. Okay. Office managers through time. I'm not going to tell you which one put the answers, but I remember that day well, and I wasn't even involved, but I saw Al storming down the hall. I think a lot of us probably remember Donna Leach. She was there, I think, the longest, has to have been, yes. Connie Krebs was there a long time. Karen Trusley, I was thinking she might even be here today, was our most recent. And there's some pictures. There's Karen and Connie and two of Donna Leach because of her long tenure. Okay. As of the spring, and this seems like a low number because we've been here 50 years, 224 Master of Science degrees. And that's because we consciously wanted to keep the group small. And it wasn't for any reason other than so they can get all the clinical experience. And yes, we do still work harder than many other faculty because it takes a lot of time to do that. But I think it was the best thing to maintain. And whatever kind of mathematics you want to use, think how many lives have been changed positively because of 224 people and how many they helped and so forth. The other thing I wanted to mention earlier, and I had almost forgotten this, and maybe you remember, Tracy, we were sent at one point to Louisville, okay, and I don't remember what the person, he was supposed to be kind of a consultant to our program, I don't know, but we went down nicely, and what I remember was his big pitch was, you need to charge people significantly for coming to the clinic because that's the only way they'll be motivated. Oh yeah? Well, we've got 25 years of experience at seeing people, and it seemed like something a businessman would think of. Oh, you got to do this to be nice to people. And what I remember driving over here today, I think we were supposed to stay all day, and about 11 o'clock, it's like, you know, you've really helped a lot. I think we're going to start driving back to Illinois. And so we left early, but I hadn't thought of that till recently. And, well, I just didn't understand it very much. Future directions, I think Leanne is going to help us here.
Thank you. So goals for the program, we are still working on keeping cohorts small, but an effort of the university has continued to be recruitment. Our intern group of 5, we want to grow those opportunities, and so part of those contact cards is because we want to continue the outreach and place our students with alum and programs and clinical settings that we know they'll be successful in. And so next year we're bringing in a group of 9, 8, 10 until they're waiting on one more. 9 hopefully for next year. And that's where we've expanded with having Brandon join the team and help provide clinical supervision. But our program is really seeking to get our students out into a lot of those settings that we know they're thriving in. And since COVID, we know that the community mental health needs have grown exponentially in school and clinical settings. And we value a lot of that social justice education that aligns with community mental health to really find and support, for both the training needs and placement needs, equitable services for the ever-changing and more diverse population of our students. In doing that, we're also trying to support the advancement of our training, and so we made a purchase this last year of iPads because our clinical assessments have moved digital, and in making sure our students are as current as possible when they're going out into those agency settings. But some of that comes with the added cost of making that move, and so we really are trying to have our best foot forward for increasing those student expertises and training needs when they're ready to go. So again, making them just as competitive as doctoral level students right out of this master's program. And in this case, where they're ready to go, and that's really the goals. And so your support of coming back and being guest lecturers or sending things our way for students to know, because some of you are in various community settings and prison populations and mental health or hospital settings, that unique training that all of you have now as experts in the field serves a purpose for the students, because those 2 years on campus are really fast, and there's a lot of content in 4 semesters and 1 summer before they're really into their various settings. And so to what extent you can continue to bring that knowledge to the program and send potential applicants our way too is how we're going to continue to grow that 224 over the next 50 years. So, thank you.
I personally want to thank Leanne and Tracy and Amy and whoever else helped put this together, because I was not even close, and they did a wonderful job, and I could tell how much work it was. So thank you, please. A couple of things, people that assist the program that we may not hear a lot about, but Norm and Carmelita Teeter established an endowment. WIU is the beneficiary of a $20 million trust, proceeds to support the psych department and international programs. They've helped some of our international students, and I've only had a few dinners with them over the years, but they're lovely people, funny. Norm was a graduate of Western, I think his bachelor's, right? I think he got his bachelor's in psych here, and yet look who came back after a really wonderful career of his own. Secondly, the Alphonse J. Richards Scholarship. I think there's been 14 recipients in 11 years, and that's a lot of lives changed among students. Ruth has been incredibly generous throughout the years and remains that. I was kind of hopeful she would come today as well. But beyond that, it's evolved into helping create 2 graduate assistant positions, and it's a nice way to keep Al's name in our minds. So let's give it to Ruth. And I might say too that the selection, at least while I was here, was never simple. And so a lot of times, there were 2 folks that received it, but it was never an easy one where it's like, oh yeah, this is the person, because I like to think we just select so well at the beginning of the program. That's what we tell ourselves, and I'm going to buy it. All right. Ooh, there's some recipients. And there's Ruth. I think there's another slide of hers too. Oh no, yeah, there she is. So that's just a few of the recipients, but that's been a wonderful addition to the program. We have learned of 3 graduates that have passed away. I did not know any of them, so I looked up to see if they had remained in the field or what they'd done. And I'm not positive about Robert Magruder. I believe that he did stay in therapy to some extent. It said in his obituary that he was a Quaker and part of the Friends of Lake Forest or Lake County. And he also had been on the governing board of a hospital as well. Nancy Renner graduated in '89. She passed away in 2016. and I can quote from her obituary, an internship in mental health care, brought Nancy to Ottumwa, Iowa. In the early 90s, she was later hired by Southern Iowa Mental Health as a counselor. Her work experience was challenging and diverse. At the time of her death, she was employed by the Iowa 8th Judicial District, First Resources Corporation Treatment and Counseling, and the Iowa Department of Corrections. She counseled individuals in 5 jails in southeast Iowa and women with substance abuse problems. So she's definitely stayed in the field. Renelle Allen, we've said several times over the tables that everything seems to connect at some point. I did not know Renelle at all. I knew her parents. I went to high school. Her parents were like 3 years older than me in high school, which is strange. She passed away in 2017, worked as a clinician for Sinisippi Centers in Dixon, then owned and operated Alliance's counseling service in Dixon and worked with Shining Star Children's Center. She was a powerful advocate for children. She worked closely with local first responders when dealing with tragic incidents. All right. I can't believe it's 1 minute till 2. So whether it's therapy or teaching class, the hour is unconsciously followed. I was honored to be asked to be here today and allowed me to revisit my own experience here, and I came away with a fresh and powerful appreciation of the program and the caliber of colleagues and students that I was able to be around. And as I said earlier, even though I don't see much of them anymore, everybody that I alluded to there remains among my favorite human beings. So to end, I'd like to quote Dr. Alphonse Richert with no cuss words. I realize I've been very, very fortunate, and so have you. Thanks.